Good morning. It's always, I shouldn't say always, but it's basically always, I said always again, an experience for me to come to the great city of Sheboygan. Back on Friday, March 24th, this is Neil. I just wanted to connect with you. This is to Aaron. I just wanted to connect with you about the weather for tomorrow morning. I'm planning on coming tomorrow, but it looks like there's more snow, and just let me know if anything changes. The elder here responds, don't worry about it, we're only getting 1 to 2 inches. But they are saying 4 to 6 for Milwaukee. You decide if you want to stay home or not. Well, I'll text you in the morning. Then he says in his great wisdom, says, I shouldn't be picking on him, but he says, yeah, you call me in the morning, but not before 8:30. I need my beauty sleep. I won't respond to what I send back. But then, Sabbath morning at 7:30, I woke him up. My wife's advice is don't go today due to the weather. It's snowing here and it looks like even harder by you. I will see you in June before camp meeting. Have a happy Sabbath. Then he takes a photo shot of the National Weather Service for down here. Nah, it's not that big of a deal. But, hi Neil, this is Lucy. I agree with your wife, and you're wise to listen to her. Now you're doubly blessed by hearing from both wives. Have a great Sabbath, and we'll look forward to your message in June. I responded back, thank you, Lucy. After 48 years, I've learned to say yes, ma'am, and I agree, and it's happier life. Then he responded back to that Ancheta canceled church. And at 9:30, I looked out my window, and there was cars plowing snow. And that night, Oshkosh got 16 inches, Green Bay got 15, De Pere 14, Appleton 14, Neenah 14. And but then I said, okay. I went back to Aaron and said, how much did you get? About an inch. So, but now some of you might remember that a couple of years ago I came down and I made sure my phone's off now. My phone rang when I was just finishing up with my presentation, and it was my wife telling me that a tree fell down on our house. We had that tornado come through, so apprehension when I come to Sheboygan. But anyways, Proverbs. I like Proverbs, and I get and you know, in church you think of Proverbs, you know, in the Bible, but there's lots of things. You know, Proverbs is basically, you know, is a collection of moral sayings and counsel. Now this may not be real effective in Sheboygan, but what is one of the most famous towns in Wisconsin?
Green Bay.
What's the famous town to residents in Northeast Wisconsin? It's even mentioned in a Cellcom commercial. Rosendale. See, you guys don't have to worry about Rosendale, but if you're up in Green Bay, Appleton, if you're going down to Madison, you could take 26 down. I fortunately have never been stopped, but that's one of the biggest speed traps in the state. And back in the 70s, the job that I had, I would drive through there twice a week, down and back and down and back. And the Peace Lutheran Church there, when you come up to this, when you're going south, come at a stoplight, and you go down, there's 2 blocks on the right. And the pastor there would change almost daily the Proverbs on there, and it was really neat. And a lot of the people that I knew that was going down, and we would always, talk about the different Proverbs. And I just thought that was really a neat way to witness, putting all these Proverbs up. So I like trivia. And so to me, kind of trivia and Proverbs kind of go together. And so I like on Facebook and on Instagram, I like different things where I can get different types of inspiration and stuff. And so I'm sharing some of those that I've gotten from there. And I hope some of it will make sense to you. If you stay silent and fail to rock the boat in this war between good and evil, your life might be easier, but your children's won't. Elon Musk, people, you love him or hate him, has 6 ethics to life. Pray, before you pray, believe. Before you speak, listen. Before you spend, earn. Before you write, think. Before you quit, try. Before you die, live. Quite intriguing. Now, I don't know if that was original from him, but I got it from him. Even though there are days I wish I could change some things that happened in my past, there's a reason the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield is so big, where your head is much more important than what you've left behind. And there's so much wisdom in that. I was talking to a young man this last week, and he's looking at going into the ministry, and he's had a tough life. And I told him, I says, yes, you've had a tough life, but it's your history that makes you who you are. You can come and you can witness to someone, or you can counsel someone, and I could go to that same person and say, I can't really relate to you, but I feel sorry for you. With your experience, you can come and say, I can relate to you, but this is what I did, this is what got me through it. So the trials help build. It's starting to build your foundation, and then you learn and grow from that. I've lived as high and as low as possible to go. There were times I'd put $10 worth of gas in my tank, and other times 50. I've had $5 to feed myself, and I've also had $200 to go out to eat. I've had a house full of food and didn't have any. I've been in stores cashing out with no worries. I've also had to add up and put things back on the shelf. I paid my bills in full. I paid them late. I've given money, and I have given money, and I've had to ask for it. We all have highs and lows, some certainly more than others, but we are all just trying to make it. No one is better than anyone else, and my heart is sad for those people who think that they are. No matter how big your house is, no matter how new your car is, or how much money sits in your bank account, we all bleed red and will eventually fade from this earth. Death has no discrimination, and neither should your life. Be kind to others. We are all here to serve. Stop the power tripping. Your oversized ego won't get you anywhere. Be humble and keep faith going. There's just, so many times it's hard to be humble. But when you look at what happened in heaven with Lucifer, it was he had so much pride that it clouded everything else. So yes, there's one thing. I remember when the boys were growing up, and I'd have salesmen come around, and they said, "Man, I just don't like Steve. He's so arrogant." I says, "No, he's not arrogant. He's confident." But you have to, as yourself, you have to manage confidence and arrogance. Consider the following. Today is the oldest you've ever been, yet the youngest you'll ever be. So enjoy this day while it lasts. Your kids are becoming you. Going out is good. Coming home is better. You forget names, but it's okay because other people forgot that they even knew you. And I have a problem with names, and it drives my family nuts. I'm pretty good at faces, but it's part of life. The things you used to care to do, you no longer care to do. But you really do care that you don't care to do them anymore. It's kind of a double-edged sword there. You sleep better in a lounge chair with a TV blaring than in bed. It's called pre-sleep. I can relate to that. I can't sleep when it's quiet. When our kids were growing up, we had a humidifier in the hallway because our house was really dry. And so we always had that little fan. Well, then when Darlene would go to camp meeting and I was home alone, I was going to be a big boy and leave it off. And I'd have to get up about an hour and turn it back on because I got to have that sound. You miss the days when everything worked with just an on and off switch. If you don't understand that, then you're young. You miss the days when everything worked with just an on and off switch. You tend to use more four-letter words. What? When? Where? Now? Now that you can afford expensive jewelry, it's not safe to wear it anymore. You used to have freckles, now they're liver spots. And everyone whispers. You have 3 sizes of clothes in your closet, 2 of which you'll never wear. But old is good in some things, old songs, old movies, and best of all, old friends. And that 4 weeks ago, we had our 50th class reunion. And it was interesting that there was 79 in our class and 38 showed up. And 9 that we know for sure are dead. 5 after graduation just fell off the earth. And we had reports from 10. But it's interesting, the guys that were handsome, have mercy. A lot of the girls that were pretty, oh my. And the ones that weren't quite supposed turned out pretty good. But I remembered most of their names. But old friends, it's neat getting together. And it had been 20 years since I'd seen a lot of them because I had an aneurysm 10 years ago at the same time. But there is something about old friends, and there's songs about old friends where you can get together and you just pick up. And it just can make you feel good just knowing and connecting. It's not what you gather, but what you scatter that tells what kind of life you have lived. I like that. An old man in Miami calls up his son in New York and says, "Listen, your mother and I are getting divorced. 45 years of misery is enough." "Dad, what are you talking about?" the son screams. We can't stand the sight of each other any longer. He says, "I'm sick of her face and I'm sick of talking about this. So call your sister in Chicago and tell her," and he hangs up. Now the son is worried. So he calls his sister. She says, "Like hell they're getting divorced," and calls her father immediately. "You're not getting divorced. Don't do anything. The 2 of us are flying home tomorrow to talk about this. Until then, don't call a lawyer. Don't file any papers. Do you hear me?" Then she hangs up. The old man turns to his wife and says, "Okay, honey, they're coming for Christmas and they're paying their own way." Just saying. God never said that this life would be easy, but he assures us that it'll be worth it. If we simply trust fully in him, especially during the struggles, we will ultimately come out victorious on the other side. You just got to trust him. Why is it so hard to trust God? I mean, every one of us can look back in our life experience and see where there was something divine that happened. And what's even scary is there's times that right in the moment I didn't realize it. And then later on I think back and I was just saved from something and didn't even realize it. There's a song, Thank God for Unanswered Prayers, and that's pretty powerful. I listen to slurring radio. It's WRVM, and they have stations all over. Here I was listening to it on the way down, it's 90.9 or something like that. But anyways, they're doing different stories at night. It's in the 6 o'clock hour, and they were doing things about Spurgeon, Charles Spurgeon, and C.S. Lewis. And I got just a couple things from them. Trials teach us what we are. They dig up the soil and let us see what we are made of. That's from Charles Spurgeon. Another one from Charles. A time will come when you insist. The time will come when instead of shepherds feeding the sheep, the church will have clowns entering the goats. You watch some of these pastors on TV. That's very true. God can give us peace and happiness apart from himself because there is no such thing. That's from C.S. Lewis. Why me, Lord? What have I ever done to deserve even one of the pleasures I've known? Tell me, Lord, what did I ever do that is worth loving you or the kindness you've shown? Tell me, Lord, if you think there's a way I can try to repay all I've taken from you. Maybe, Lord, I can show someone else what I've been through myself on the way back to you. Lord, help me, Jesus. I've wasted it so. Help me, Jesus. I know what I am. Now that I know what I've needed, that I've needed you so, help me, Jesus. My soul's in your hand. Have any of you heard that before? It's a song written by Chris Christopherson. And I had heard the song, he wrote it in 72. And I had heard it growing up. And, I shouldn't say growing up, but after that, and it was always kind of intrigued me. And one night when I was laying in bed, I had the radio on Sheboygan, and they played this song. And when they got done, they said it was written by Chris Christopherson. And I didn't know that. So I jumped up and I said, I think I got that on a CD. And I looked and I did. Well then, thanks to YouTube, I was going through there, and the interview on YouTube and have interest, look up Chris Christopherson and the backstory of this song. And it's extremely interesting. I've actually done a sermon on Chris Christopherson's music, that he lived a hard life, and he realized it. He realized he made decisions, but he went to turn his life around, and to write a song like that, that's deep. And when I first heard it, I was going, oh, why me, Lord? But when you look at it, why me, Lord? Why am I getting these blessings? I don't deserve these. What did I do to get this? But because of God's grace, you can say, why me, Lord? I really don't deserve it, but thank you so much. It's deep. It's really deep. Sometimes things aren't always what they seem to be. And a lot of times it's hard to comprehend that. But, okay, that song was written in 72. And I graduated in 73. I was 50 50th reunion. But when I started after graduation, I was working in the wholesale greenhouse business. And we got seeds from the A.H. Hummert Seed Company, which means nothing to anybody other than the fact that they sent out this sheet. And I still have the original sheet, because I've had a lot of different jobs in my life, but and different careers, but everything has evolved around sales and marketing. There once was a man that lived by the side of the road and sold hot dogs. He was hard of hearing, so he had no radio. He had trouble with his eyes, so he read a newspaper, but he sold hot dogs. He put up signs on the highway telling how good they were. He stood on the side of the road and cried, "Buy a hot dog, sir!" And people bought. He increased his meat sales and buns order. He bought a bigger stove to take care of his trade. He finally got his son home from college to help out, but then something happened. His son said, "Father, haven't you heard? Haven't you been listening to the radio? Haven't you been reading the newspaper? There's a big depression. The European situation is terrible. The domestic situation is worse." Whereupon the father thought, well, my son's been to college, he reads newspaper, he listens to the radio, he ought to know. So the father cut down on his meat and bun order. He took down his advertising signs and no longer bothered to stand by the highway to sell his hot dogs. And his hot dog sales fell overnight. "You're right," the father said. "There is a depression. Things are falling apart." That just struck me. That what do you perceive? If your perception, believe half of what you hear and a quarter of what you see. I hate when people confuse education and wisdom with intelligence. You can have a bachelor's degree and still be an idiot. I'm a little crude on that, but what it gets down to is you have to analyze what is. You got to give some thought. Although he was very precise about everything he had to say, no one could imagine that he would become today's truth with this story from years ago. I read this years ago and was blown away how relevant today it is. This speech was broadcast by the legendary ABC radio commentator in April 3, 1965. It's entitled "If I Were the Devil" by Paul Harvey. Some of you here are old enough to remember Paul Harvey, that he was on at noon, and he came from WGN radio out of Chicago, so at noon Central Time. And people would stop at lunchtime to hear him. He'd do 15 minutes. And it revolved around him. And it was he wasn't a newsman, he was an opinion person. And he'd go through and bring up highlights of what he thought needed to be discussed. And it would be interesting because every once in a while he had mentioned, and this was for one of God's special ladies, Ellen White. And he always he leaned conservative and religious, but he mentioned Ellen White several times. "If I were the Prince of Darkness, I would want to engulf the whole world in darkness. I'd have 1/3 of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I would not be happy until I seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I would set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first, and I would begin a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince the children that man created God instead of the other way around. I'd confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. In the old, I would teach to pray after me, Our Father which art in Washington. Then I'd be organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting to that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could, sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves until each in his turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellect, but neglect to discipline emotions. I'd tell teachers to let their students run wild, and before you know it, you'd have a drug-sniffing dog and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. This was written in '65. With a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing and judges promoting pornography. Soon I would evict God from the courthouse and the schoolhouses, and then from the houses of Congress. In his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and defy science. I'd lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it. Let me back up. If I were the devil, I would take from those who have and give to those that want it. I'd kill the incentive of the ambitious. What do you bet I could get whole states to promote gambling as a way to get rich? I'd convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, and that what you see on television is the way to be. And thus, I could undress you in public and lure you into bed with diseases for which there are no cures. In other words, if I were the devil, I keep right on doing what he's doing. Interesting. Yesterday, all my troubles seemed so far away, and now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. Suddenly, I'm not half the man I used to be. There are shadows hanging over me. Oh, yesterday came suddenly. What is driving in your mind provisions of what are important to you? When you're contemplating life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, what things really trick your mind? 10 signs you're doing well in life. You have a roof over your head. You ate today. You have a good heart. You wish good for others. You have clean water. Someone cares for you. You strive to be better. You have clean clothes. You have a dream. You are breathing. Be thankful for the little things, for they are the most important. And that's something that we in America take so that we just expect it. But there's a lot of people, and even in America, that don't have good water, that they're going to bed hungry. They don't have clean clothes, and their dreams are destroyed. That's where faith comes in and understanding grace, that they go together. Another something to Google is How Beautiful Heaven Must Be, written by Bill and Gloria Gaither. And there's just so much meaning in that. Those are the thoughts that I have, and hopefully some of them will resonate and be of value. as we move on. Our closing song is page 526, Because He Lives. Lord, again, thank you for giving us the opportunity and the privilege to come together and worship you. And God, thank you for giving your Son to lay down his life so that we can have a future. And because he lives, we can face tomorrow. Because he holds our future, and life is worth the living because he lives. Now it's up to us to share our knowledge and our relationships of your grace and understanding. Thank you, Lord. In your name, amen.